Hello, everyone, and welcome to this virtual meetup with Healthcare IT Today, and brought to you by the great people at Proofpoint. We're excited that all of you could join. We're going to give people maybe a minute or two to kind of hop on. I know it's always interesting in this Zoom world. Sometimes you need a couple minutes to go from meeting to meeting or from Zoom to Zoom, but we're excited to have you here for this great discussion. The topic today is called Be Vigilant, a look at supply chain fraud in healthcare. And we have a panel of really great experts that are going to share some practical insights and perspectives on some of the security issues that are happening, and especially the way that they're trying to exploit the supply chain. And I mean, obviously with COVID, that has become a massive topic and a massive opportunity for hackers and other people who would like to exploit your healthcare organization. So today our goal is really to help you find some practical understanding and solutions and direction for the work you're doing, and to hopefully avoid those issues and then deal with them if they do come up in your organization. As you saw, when you signed up for the event, the numbers are just astounding. It's amazing how much healthcare is being hit. The Proofpoint survey found that, there were 200,000 emails from over 10,000 different third-party domains from partners, from your suppliers. And you think about that from a risk surface perspective, that's scary, right? That is a lot of interaction and a lot of business that's being done over email and over those interactions with third parties, and being able to manage that is really important. They had another stat from that survey that 98% received some email-based threat, and 97% received threats from at least one of their suppliers, obviously through impersonation or even business email compromise. So that's a challenging thing to think about. I'd love to see the 2%, the 3% that haven't gotten it, because it just seems like everyone is dealing with that. So that's our discussion today, and we look forward for everyone participating live. If you have questions, definitely submit them into the Zoom chat in the question and answer. We're happy to include those questions in our discussion as well. So without further ado, let's do some intros. I'll start with, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today, a leading healthcare IT publication. Excited to be moderating today. We'll go ahead and go around the circle. So Chris Baldwin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly, yeah. I'm Chris Baldwin. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Hartford Healthcare. We're about a $5 billion corporation with 8 hospitals and a very large network of ambulatory services, specialty services. I've been involved in healthcare IT my whole career as a CIO, and for the last 7 or 8 years as a CISO. And I'm pleased to join the panel today.
Great to have you here, Chris. Ryan, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Ryan Witt. I am the resident CISO for healthcare for Proofpoint, and I also run the company's healthcare customer advisory board. Proofpoint is an organization that's very focused on protecting people and how they're attacked, and providing mitigating strategies to go keep those bad actors at bay.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Ryan. And last but not least, Judy Hatchet.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Judy Hatchet. I am the VP and Chief Information Security Officer at SureScripts. We are a privately held company, but also the nation's largest pharmaceutical network alliance that basically transfers all of your prescriptions from the hospital to your pharmacies. So heavily into the healthcare environment. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks.
Great. So Judy, maybe you could start us off. I don't think we need to talk about the, healthcare is being attacked. We know this, right? We've heard that in 30,000 webinars the last few years, right? But what incidents have really caught your eye? And maybe more importantly, what are these incidents or maybe any trends, telling us, that we need to watch out for?
Clearly, it's, the ransomware, like you said, healthcare is getting attacked. That's nothing new. So that's something that we're continually being vigilant about. We're looking to see which one of our customers are getting attacked and when they're getting attacked, and what does that mean to us, and how they're getting attacked. The second thing is looking at what's happening within the supply chain and really understanding what that supply chain, either that vendor is playing a role, if they're playing a role in our organization, and what it means to us. I mean, there are some very, very sophisticated supply chain attacks out there that are hard to detect. And then the other thing is we are still very, very vigilant on email threats. Email threats, I mean, 98 to 99% of your attacks are going to come in via email. And so that is something that we also spend a lot of time researching phishing attempts, looking at our third parties that might be have impacted, the email compromises that come from that. And then the other piece that's probably not 100% related to this is we also look at potential fraud within the pharmaceutical network. And so when we have like Texas DMV that got hacked, we start seeing a lot of fraudulent activity from that because they've taken over driver's license, which also still impacts us. So.
Yeah, and you probably see it firsthand being connected to pretty much every pharmacy. You're a ripe target. That's great. Chris, anything you'd add as far as trends that you're kind of seeing or incidents that stand out in your mind that may have a lesson for the people watching?
Certainly support what Judy just said about ransomware. That's just so prevalent right now. And I think the two incidents that I might call out, one would be University of Vermont Medical Center. I believe it happened back last November when there was a widespread warning and attack, series of attacks, and the impact, on their electronic health record just from reading what was in the public domain, the outage and the impact of that, and the millions of dollars that it cost the organization. The other one I would call out would be Elekta. Elekta, for those who may not be aware, is one of the nation's highest regarded vendors in the radiation oncology space. They sell EHR systems and very connected technology to linear accelerators to provide radiation therapy. And their cloud services were attacked and really disrupted a number of organizations that were using that. So when you think about the supply chain, you think about the third parties, how they can impact you. I think that's just one that comes top of mind for me.
Yeah. Ryan, you want to add anything? And maybe let's expand it, talking about the security risk equation and how has that evolved as well?
Yeah, I want to go back to the first question, then I will evolve my response. So I think the thing that's really caught my eye, and Chris alluded to it a little bit as well, is these, and I don't want this to be about ransomware because I think there's a lot about ransomware right now, and the reality is that far more prevalent are things like supply chain fraud in terms of what's impacting health institutions day in, day out. But you see the ransomware attack, the one Chris alluded to, the one on the West Coast as well. These are pretty large institutions who essentially couldn't provide patient care to their communities for about a month, give or take. And I think it's a very timely reminder that there is no line that can't be crossed. There is no, these are organized criminal organizations, these are organized crime sort of syndicates. They are trying to find a way to monetize their attacks. They have found that these do work. And there's no sort of moral compass they can't violate. And I think we should always think about that's going to be something that is, I think, going to be plaguing healthcare for some time to come. And if these institutions are breachable, given some of their stature and their investment, I think everybody is vulnerable. Everybody should just remember that it could happen to them next. And I think that maybe the overarching comment that I really liked, if there's any sort of silver lining in this, is there's a strong recognition, I think, now within the healthcare community that there is a direct correlation between one's ability to provide a security posture and safeguarding that institution, keeping those cyber criminals at bay, and meeting that institution's mission. So if you can't provide the safeguards in place to secure your institution, your ability to provide patient care, adhere to patient safety is significantly compromised. And so we shouldn't think about this as a, brand valuation or brand devaluing, or being on the wrong side of some sort of regulation or compliance, or having to go pay a hefty fine. Those are all obviously strong considerations as well, but this goes to the core to a health institution's ability to go meet their mission. And I think I don't want to like play it up too much, but I think we're seeing too many examples now where there is that direct correlation.
Yeah. It was interesting what you just said, though, Ryan, that you think ransomware is not as common as some of the other supply chain attacks, and could you quantify some of that for us? I mean, that's
Sure.
interesting because ransomware gets all the headlines probably because it takes down patient care, right? We don't hear as much if they, if you accidentally transfer $10,000 to the wrong supplier, whatever it might be. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can look at this, and there's a lot of data you can point to. You pick your threat report of choice, your threat vendor of choice, and look at their data. But essentially, it says the same thing, which is ransomware is a serious. Let's make no bones about it. It is a very serious exploit we have to be really concerned about. But the number of high-profile ransomware attacks that we can talk about are, thankfully, whether they're in healthcare or outside of healthcare, they're still relatively limited. Okay, so they're high profile, and they're the kind of thing that make like sort of kitchen table conversations. So all your friends and loved ones and family members who are not in IT or healthcare or cybersecurity will know a little bit about these things because they just hear it on the news. But if I'm a CISO, if I don't want to speak for Chris or Judy here, but it feels like, on a data standpoint, you're seeing fraud sort of type attacks hitting daily, like numerous times a day. If you actually look at the amount of money lost to fraudulent activities, there's more money lost to fraud than every other exploit combined. So yes, we have to be concerned about ransomware. But if you want to, now that we're on the brink of the start of the NFL season, like you got to stop the run. If you don't stop the run, they're going to keep running on you. The run is fraud right now. That is like the run play, and that's what we also got to be focused on. If that analogy works, I don't know.
Yeah,
No, I would agree with that. I mean, you brought up a very good point, Ryan. Ransomware is huge. You cannot keep your eye off the ball on that. You have got to stay vigilant. But you're right, John. Some of the fraudulent activities of where you've paid a compromised supply chain or third-party vendor millions of dollars because they disguise themselves so well and looking like a real vendor, that doesn't typically make the news. Now the organizations still suffer, and the FBI is involved. You have the same players involved in that type of an activity usually if it's a large number, like you do in a ransomware attack, but that doesn't typically make the news. Doesn't mean they don't happen. They happen all the time. Every CISO has seen them happen at some point in their career. And so it's very challenging. And the same thing with the fraud. The fraud is a big one. Like you may have, it's almost like a ripple down effect. You have some place where there was a hack that is causing fraud into another part of the organization or another part of your industry. So it's a multiple moving piece. You can't keep your eye off any of them.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't go on the HHS wall of shame, right? So,
Right.
because it's not essentially a breach of PHI, it's just a financial one. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I mean, I support, what my colleagues are saying here. And I would also point out that, phishing attacks are just so prevalent. And these phishing attacks, you may not ultimately know what the desired outcome of the threat actor is. So they come in and a lot of them are looking to harvest credentials. And what do they want to do with those credentials, right? Fraud. I mean, so I guess my point is that, we need to look at those things and have safeguards that protect us from them for all of the reasons, ransomware, fraud, et cetera,
Sure.
et cetera. So,
To Chris's point, and it's something that our researchers talk about a little bit, there's been a marked change in cyber criminal activity. So, go back 2 or 3 years ago, cyber criminals had their exploits of choice. So they developed a particular exploit. They would use that exploit within their cyber criminal activities, and it might be around Trojans, or it might be around ransomware, whatever that exploit is. Now we see a shift in technique, and that technique is, and goes back to Chris's point, is get your credentials. The credentials are the nirvana state. Once they have access into your network, they can be incredibly nimble and figure out which of those exploits now is the right one to go launch against whatever credentials they've seized or wherever they've been able to penetrate the network. So yes, It might be a ransomware attack, it might be a fraud attack, whatever, but we're not just seeing cybercriminal A using exploit B launching an attack. We're now seeing cybercriminals A, B, C, D, E all trying to get credentials, getting into the network, and then trying to figure out where they're going to attack.
Well, and it seems like there's been an increase in patience as well. So, once they get the credential, they might sit there and try to understand what are the exploits that are available. I've heard of a number of stories that, the person had the person's email and they watched it for 3 months or 6 months to understand where they could exploit him, which I think that's a maturity, sad maturity of the hackers that are trying to compromise too, right? So are you seeing some of that as well? And maybe, Chris, you could, extend it as well. Like, what are you doing about this? Because you have how many, 10, 20,000 employees? How do you address that? Since it's really a human issue.
It is a human issue. And of course, training the workforce, testing the workforce with phishing drills is really important. But that's not enough because, let's say you can drive, your compromise rate from 5% to 1%, right? 1% of 40,000 users is a pretty big number. And all it takes, as they say, all it takes is one. So it really is, classic layers of security. One of the things that we found very effective is we call it, it's the fish alarm. We train the workforce to report when they see something suspicious, and that almost crowdsources the response process. And we've found that to be very effective in our drills. More people are reporting a good thing. More people are reporting the fish than are being compromised by it in our drills, which is a really good thing. So, I think that, but the point about dwell time in the network and, back to layers of security, you really need to protect your endpoints. You need to have detection technology so that you know when they're there. There's so many different really good tools that are out there, but you have to really be thinking about all of them. And you'll always have to assume that you will get attacked and that there's a possibility that you can get compromised, just from a mindset perspective.
Judy, anything you'd add to that as far as the layers you're doing, and how do you target your efforts to be more effective?
The only thing I would add to that, Chris is spot on about defense in depth and having your layers in place. The other thing is just understanding your inside threat intelligence. What is normal activity? What are the normal set of users and the data that they should be accessing? So if you see a PM all of a sudden accessing confidential data, that's abnormal. And how do you detect that and how do you report on that? Because if you have these bad actors that are just sitting and being patient, they may go after an account. Maybe it's a sysadmin, but the sysadmin hasn't logged into this box in 3 months, and now they're hitting it every day for 4 times a day. That's suspicious activity that you've got to be able to detect and at least investigate and understand, is this normal? Reach out, find out, should they be doing this? Should they be doing this? Because like you said, these actors are becoming very patient. They are no longer grab and go. They're like, let's just sit and hang out. Let's see what we can take. Let's see what the crown jewels are. And then let's make our exit. And then when they make their exit, they make it big. But it's really just being able to understand your normal behavior of your users. And yes, it's hard in a large organization, but you still have buckets of users. You still have different like lab technicians or things like that that may be accessing systems that they normally don't. And it's just being able to detect that and act on it.
Yeah, on dwell time, one of the organizations that looks at this pretty technically is Ponymon. So they often, in one of their annual reports, they talked about how long is a bad actor in a network before they're detected. And I think the healthcare number is, give or take, about 180 days. But let's say that Ponymon are wrong by a factor of wrong by 50%. Let's say it's only 90 days. That's still a significant dwell time in the network, right? And that's kind of the equivalent of essentially living in the closet of your spare bedroom, observing the activity of your household before you decide what do you want to steal, what's valuable, when do they not hear, when can I come out of that closet to go do my nefarious activities. And I think the credentials are so valuable that they do want to have that level of patience, to use that word, and to make sure that they strike where it's going to be the most impactful from a financial gain standpoint. So we should be really serious about this and be really, really rigid about safeguarding the credentials, because that's so often where it starts.
Yeah. So Ryan, I mean, not all credentials are created equal though, right? Like an MA versus, an accounts payable is very different. You have a lot of data at Proofpoint around this. What are some of the areas that are being attacked the most in healthcare?
So I'll answer that at a macro level and I'll give you a few examples. So the trend tends to be people who just work in a vulnerable way. So like in this discussion, people in the supply chain, they just work in a way, they have to interact with third parties very, very regularly. So it means that they're a higher risk target. They're perceived to be more valuable from a credential standpoint. People who have a high profile job, either because they're an executive or because they're a noteworthy surgeon, or they have something, or they're a clinical researcher, those are people who also are very highly targeted. So if you have those people in your organization, they're going to be targeted. And then lastly, people who legitimately, there's no doubt about it, they have access to very valuable pieces of data. So people within your finance team, your accounts payable team, I mean, they have access to that sort of credentials people want to monetize, or bad actors want to monetize. More specifically for healthcare, we've seen lots of examples, particularly in the supply chain, where very targeted job titles are being hit time after time, like exponentially higher, exponentially more valuable from a bad actor standpoint. So they target those institutions, those sort of individuals. If you have a clinical research component in your organization, those are highly desirable, particularly from nation state actors who want to go obtain that level of intellectual property. So I think to your question, broadly speaking, there might be 10-15% of your organization who are far more heavily targeted than the rest of your organization. And if you have to make some trade-offs from a security control standpoint, we would argue that it's a good place to try to understand where the bad actors are targeting, so you can start making some of your choices from a control standpoint, because most CISOs I talk to do have budget constraints and resource constraints, etc. So you can't do it all as much as you'd like to.
Chris doesn't have unlimited budget. I can't believe this, but he wishes, right? So Chris, I mean, to that point, as you look at email fraud and attacking the supply chain, which parts of your supply chain are really most vulnerable to those imposter attacks, and what are you seeing, in that regard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly support everything Ryan was saying. I mean, and I'll speak a little bit generically here rather than specifically. But, when you look at, things like accounts payable clerks and any kind of, open mailboxes that might be used to, receive documents like purchase orders and invoices and things like that. Those are certainly targets. The whole social engineering component of this, right? Those people who can be easily convinced or more easily convinced to surrender their credentials, right? You think about the more, the administrative assistant in the C-suite who gets some rather targeted message from an executive or the chief executive, and please take this action. It can be pretty intimidating. So you have to think about who's being manipulated and how they're being manipulated. I would also just point out that one other dimension of this is just anybody who has their email that's been breached or is public facing. LinkedIn, it gets scraped for email addresses. Don't put your work email address. Use some Yahoo email address in LinkedIn, and don't expose it. Any of that is potentially exploitable. So those are just a couple of additional thoughts.
Yeah, I heard it recently that it's one of those security vulnerabilities it's somewhat unique to healthcare because those in healthcare want to help. Like it's like our nature of healthcare is to try to help, try to serve, and many of these bad actors are exploiting that fact. So, Judy, anything you'd add, and maybe even let's take it another step further, like, what are you doing to adapt your programs, whether it's your security awareness programs or other tools to really counter these email fraud attacks?
Well, I think first I'm going to state that we're all humans and we're all going to make mistakes. So there's no foolproof method on how you do your awareness or your training, but you do have to have a regular program in place and you have to change it up. Let me go back to the first part about the particular people that are being hit is we see it in our supply chain. We see it in our third-party vendors that we actually are often calling them and saying, hey, we think you've been compromised because we received this. And they are sometimes smaller organizations that don't have a lot of security controls in place and they didn't even realize that they've been compromised. We've also seen other large institutions in my other roles where they had compromised their email exchange box. They weren't quite aware of it yet. We had to make them aware. So some of that is having that open relationship with your third parties as well and being able to know who they are and who to contact. Don't send an email, pick up the phone and call them.
There's an irony there.
Yep. But yeah, it's from awareness standpoint is we do regular training awareness with our entire staff. There's also just-in-time training when you do send out a phishing test, and if they fail, you have that immediate reaction to here's what you did wrong, here's where you want to look at it. You also have to have a plan in place on how you're going to handle your repeat offenders. Some of your repeat offenders might be the ones that are getting targeted the most from an email phishing attempt, not just internally, but from externally as well. Maybe they do high data downloads. Maybe they have, maybe they're the admin to the CEO. How do you train them? Because how you want them to be more vigilant, even with the CFO and things like that. So a lot of it's just in time training, making sure you're mixing up, make it look as real as possible. Make sure you have a really good partner that allows you to customize to your environment and to your business. Not that you're trying to catch anybody, but that's really trying to keep people aware and help them understand what looks bad and taking that half a second to say, do I recognize this? People work very fast. We are constantly going through email, trying to get through things really fast. We want them just to take that one, just half a breath pause to say, do I know this person, rather than just clicking.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd bring up Brene Brown in a security discussion, but you bring up some interesting points about the shame we associate with being compromised. I think it's telling that Chris has created a culture that he's getting a lot of people saying that, hey, something might have happened or that there's some risk. I think when you're punitive with your punishment or the way you address it, even how you verbalize it, it prevents people from sharing that information because of the shame associated with, oh, am I compromised? Am I going to be punished for this? So I think creating that culture is a powerful one. I think you highlighted that a number of ways, Judy. Ryan, were you going to chime in?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a shift, and we kind of seen this during COVID, for example, but there's been a shift in who is being attacked and how they're being attacked. So, it's not just your C-level executives being attacked. Of course, they're going to be attacked, right? Sure. It's so much more broad than that these days. And we did a study, not like a publishable study, but we looked at how teaching hospitals were being targeted. And we looked at this one institution in particular. They're a very noteworthy teaching hospital, had multiple different research units. I forget, but it was like more than 5 research units they looked at, or they research institutes they were staffing up in. But they were particularly prominent in one area of research. And if you look at the profile of how they were being attacked, the research function within their institution was by far the most attacked part of their ecosystem. But even within the research function, there was just one institute that, again, was exponentially higher in terms of the attack rate. And it just really illustrated the links from a social engineering that the cyber criminals will go to make sure they absolutely understand your institution, their targets, and what is they believe either the soft spot within the defenses or the most valuable place to penetrate. And they will go do their due diligence. Make no mistake, they will do their due diligence. And it's a lot easier to do due diligence on social engineering as opposed to, say, 3 or 4 years ago when the due diligence was around trying to find a zero-day attack, vector. They will figure that out. And if you believe within your institution that you have something that's highly valuable, even if it's seemingly below the radar, the bad actors probably figure that out as well. And you should just make sure you have extreme caution to protect those sort of, as I think usually Judy used the word, crown jewels. That would be an example of protecting your crown jewels, but maybe at an area where it wouldn't be so necessarily readily obvious compared to how you expect the attack to occur.
It seems like the message you're sharing is they're doing their due diligence and we need to as well. And luckily there's a lot of fingerprints out there to understand where are they attacking. You gave a great example. Chris, let's shift gears a little to some of the technologies out there. I mean, we have DMARC, we have isolation, we have zero trust, we have DLP, et cetera. Like, which technologies interest you most in relation to email fraud defense?
Yeah, great question. And I guess I would start with all of the above.
All of them.
But I would call out, certainly multi-factor authentication. It's not a defense specifically within the email framework itself, but if through a phishing attack credentials are compromised, then it's certainly the defense to prevent that threat actor from getting in with those credentials if there's a second factor required. That's really important. And it's a baseline. I would also encourage everyone to make sure that all of your access methods into email are protected. Mobile, functions like Outlook Anywhere, do you have that enabled? Is it protected by two-factor? Just make sure you're thorough, because I think that's what the threat actors are creative, and they'll get those credentials. They'll find a way to use them if they can. I think some of the other things you mentioned, I'm a really big believer in isolation, URL rewriting, how to protect the user if they get that phish or they get that malicious message and they do click, being able to put them through some sort of filter. That we use that very extensively. So those would be a couple of examples that I would call out.
Do you have issues getting them to do two-factor authentication because it is somewhat of an inconvenience, or do you use kind of the data that we talked about previously that says, hey, you're at high risk, so that inconvenience of two-factor, it's worth it? Have you played that out, or? Yeah,
fortunately, we started probably 2.5 years ago to really press forward with our two-factor implementation. So we went organization by organization. We engaged our communications department. We did a lot of educational campaigns around it. And then we got to the point where, I won't get into all the reasons, but we were, probably at 90%, and we just, we have made the decision that we're just going to, because, there's always those outliers. They're the most difficult to reel into a technology at the end of the day, right? Maybe they're your vendors. Maybe they're, but we flipped the mandatory switch, essentially to get into the network, right? And so, is it difficult? It is. It's. I wouldn't want to have to just turn it on and just expect that you're not going to have a lot of ripples, and if you do that. But at this point, I think two-factor is just a baseline. And any organization that doesn't have it is at higher risk.
Yeah. Judy, anything you'd add to the technologies that are interesting to you?
I agree with Chris, all of the above. I mean, email threat protection is a huge huge piece of it. Multi-factor is like foundational. It's table stakes. It shuts the front door. Now you may have a window open somewhere that you got to worry about, but you definitely shut the front door, and it makes them a little bit harder. There's, the DLP can be very noisy, but it's also very valuable. DMARC also, it takes a lot of time and effort, but it's very valuable to be able to do that. Your endpoint protection is huge. Monitoring, knowing which accounts you should be monitoring, additions, deletions of those accounts, those administrative accounts is also huge. Knowing which alerts that you should be able to pay attention to. So there's always going to be noise when you're monitoring with any type of SIM product, but having some type of algorithm in place that after so many attempts of the same action, it hires up that, or makes higher that maybe it's a risk ratio that now you need to pay attention to it. But it's identity and access management is another big table stakes. You have to know who is in your environment, what they have access to, why they have access to it. And if they leave your environment, that access is also removed in a very timely, quick fashion. So identity and access management is another table stakes option that you have, or table stakes that you have to do for security technology.
Great. So we got a question from the audience, and if anyone else has questions, definitely submit them. We're happy to take those live. But it looks like Teresa asked, besides technology, what about training, awareness, and advocacy? Do you all have security awareness programs in place, making your employees your first line of defense? Love to hear, I don't know, Judy, do you want to start? How about training, awareness, and advocacy?
Yeah, we have pretty robust in both my previous role and where I'm at now, pretty robust training and awareness programs. Like I said, we do just-in-time training. When we do phishing awareness, we make a big, huge production out of the Cybersecurity Awareness Month coming up October. We do capture the flag to teach different things.
That's cool.
Yeah, we actually are doing some other really cool things. Well, when you click on a phish, what happens, and being able to demonstrate just how bad it is and all the different areas that they go into. And what was the second part of that one again? I'm sorry, John, I forgot the.
Yeah, I think it was training, awareness, advocacy, and
Yep.
Do you have a security awareness program?
Yeah, and the other thing is having security champions. So if you have, development teams, or even if you have other contacts within other parts of the organization, making them security champions, making them an extension of your program, and really rewarding them for that. Train them on how to do different detection and awareness, and working within those groups. We believe in having a security champions program within our agile teams, and that helps us a lot with our purple teaming and different types of activities around there. Within sharing different threat intel, things like that. But having those key people outside of your own organization that feel like they're part of the security team, but don't have all the responsibilities of a security team where they're up 7/24 is a big thing too.
Yeah, I think it's important to target it as well, right? I mean, so much of the training is about storytelling and having the right data to be able to tell that story. I think it's such a powerful combination. Ryan, anything you'd add either on the training side, or we can even expand it, because I think it's hard. How do we balance kind of the people, process, and technology side of things?
Yeah, I think on training, it is very important, obviously, and it's probably the easiest control to roll out, right? So if you feel like you have a user or a department that's vulnerable, it's probably the quickest control you can put in place. So it's very important, and I would never underestimate that importance. However, keeping as much of those malware or those exploits or those emails from your users is also really important. So you're not wholly reliant on them having to make that judgment call, because it's becoming harder and harder and harder to discern what is a malicious or fraudulent mail. They're becoming so sophisticated. They're very well established techniques about being very casual in their email techniques, hitting people who are maybe not such obvious targets. The guard might be down. So I would, as much technology as you can put in place to keep that away from your users, like that'd be great. One that I would emphasize that I think Chris alluded to a little bit earlier is isolation technology. I bring it up because it's a great way to make sure that anybody who's vulnerable or has a propensity to click on things, you can put some sort of safeguards around them, And it's also, unfortunately, capability that I don't see that prevalently installed in the marketplace. And so that's maybe a little bit of an easier win, to the degree that there's any easy wins here. But that's something I would also maybe point out, is isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, what would you add as far as that balance between, the training requirements, the technology, and, and even just the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all are important. I think any security control or safeguard, you're always going to find a blend between the people, the process, the technology, and tools. And depending upon the control, one or more may be emphasized. Obviously, training, administrative controls, those are things, policies, those are things that you want to really make sure, the broad population of users is out there and, alert, right? Aware that they live in a danger, or they're surfing or opening emails in a dangerous neighborhood, if you will. But other tools that are automated, but even those, you need to have the right process. So if you have detection technology that's really good, what's your process for actually being able to make sure that at 3 a.m, somebody's listening? And so just implementing and supporting the tools, right? Having the engineering talent so that this stuff is complicated, so that, you can build it the right way and you can build it in a way that works. So I guess I would just reinforce all three are important. Probably the importance varies depending upon the safeguard.
Yeah. That 3 a.m. call sounds like a personal experience, but I think we've all had it if we've dealt with security, right?
Yeah, well, and one of the things that we did is we secured a 24/7 monitoring service that's on top of our next generation endpoint protection, right? So, our endpoints are our canary in the cave, and and we have people listening and monitoring 24/7. It's definitely I'm glad I have it. It's not perfect, but it's important.
Yeah, considering the number of spam messages I get at 1 a.m., the hackers do enjoy that time. So while we're sleeping, as we kind of wrap up this meetup, this has been really great. But maybe we'll go around the horn as well. And Judy, you could start. What are some of your key takeaways? What are the key learning points that you think we should emphasize to those listening to our discussion?
Keep being vigilant and paying attention to what's happening within your industry and the types of attacks that are happening. Make sure that you have practiced your disaster recovery as well as your business continuity. Know what needs to happen. Don't underestimate the value of a good email threat protection tool. Like I said, 99% of your threats are going to come in via email. Multi-factor is incredibly important, as well as identity and access management.
Awesome. Chris, you want to go next?
Sure. I would call out the fact that, every organization is different. So, make sure that you're taking a risk-based approach toward prioritization rather than just a resource-based approach of these are the amount of resources I have, so therefore this is what I can do. And that's where it really is important to make sure that, from the board all the way on down, you're connected with the organization on the importance of the overall cybersecurity program, so that you can get the support to do what you need to do. But again, I think I would email is when you talk about risk, it's always at the top of the list. So I would call that out too.
I thought email was dead, but I guess the reports are not accurate. No, it's amazing how it's still so influential, especially in business life. So great point. Ryan, you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, I'd probably start by saying, a shout out and props to this community, really. Healthcare is such an important industry for all of us, for all the obvious reasons. It is such under huge focus and pressure right now. And I think the security professionals in healthcare have done a wonderful job. And, not just navigating the challenges we talked about today, but also having support a completely changing of work environment where everyone was working from home, having to be resourceful enough to go cater for, what's all happening with COVID and spinning up, emergency hospitals and those sort of environments. I did an amazing job to this community. I think in terms of the takeaways, we talked about this already essentially, but they want your credentials. Like that is their nirvana state. That is what they are trying to get to. So if you can't do it all from a security control sort of standpoint, I would focus really heavily on making sure that you make it as hard as possible for bad actors to be able to get your credentials. There is research and data out there about who is being targeted and why they're being targeted. Use that data to your advantage and put in the security programs that will best safeguard that sort of threat vector. That I think is probably going to pay the largest short-term and long-term dividends. So I think that would be protecting very, very vigorously credentials is a very significant place to start.
Excellent. I want to thank our panelists. This has been really informative about a challenging area that we're all facing. And I think Ryan's too humble to share, but Proofpoint puts out a ton of great data as well around who's being targeted, have a great insight into who's, through their customers, they see firsthand many of the people and organizations and titles and departments that are being targeted. So be sure to check that out. And I want to thank all our panelists and thanks everyone for watching. We'll go ahead and have this recording made available to everyone that registered. And you can also be sure to check it out on the healthcareittoday.com website where we'll share it. So thanks so much, everyone. And let's stay vigilant and keep sharing as we all battle these bad actors. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.